Hello, my friends. Today we are starting the second book in Rambam. We are starting the book of love. Rambam calls this book the book of love, the book of Ahava in Hebrew, and where we discuss, after we finished discussing the last book, the fact that we should always be serving God from a place of love. So now we begin the new book, the second book of Rambam, discussing the various actions that we do on a day-to-day basis. And he calls the book of love, because all these actions that we do in every day is from a place of love for God. So in this book, we're going to be discussing the various actions and mitzvot that we do on a day-to-day basis, starting from the laws of the reciting of Shema. And as you will see here, he lists out all the laws that we're going to be discussing within this book. But before he opens up the book and he starts discussing the actual laws, the Rambam brings a special verse where he says, "In the name of the Lord, the God of the world, how I love your Torah. It is what I discuss the entire day." It is a verse from Psalms chapter 119. And the idea is that we are always, because of our love, that is why we always discuss the words of the Torah, what God wants us to do. So this is the second book of the Rambam, the book of love, and it contains in it 6 different set of laws. The laws of reciting the Shema, as we mentioned, the laws of prayer and the priestly blessing, which is done during the prayer, the laws regarding the writing of Torah scrolls, tefillin and mezuzot, the laws of tzitzit, the laws of blessings, the laws of circumcision, and then we also have at the end the order of the prayers, the actual text of what we read while we pray. So in the laws of Shema, which we're going to be beginning today, this contains one commandment of the Torah, which is to recite the Shema daily, twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening, as the Rambam begins and he tells us that the mitzvah is that we have to read Shema every single day, twice a day, as it says in the verse, when you wake up and when you go to sleep. So twice in the day, when we lie down and when we rise, we have to read the Shema. So this is in the time when people go to sleep. It doesn't actually physically mean when you go to sleep, but rather in the time when you go to sleep and in the time when you wake up. And that is during the day. So we have the night and the day. So what does a person actually have to read? So there are 3 paragraphs from the Torah that we read when we say the Shema. We read, first of all, the chapter of Hear, O Israel, that's how it begins. And then we have, and that talks about the idea of the oneness of God and our love for God and how we have to study about God, etc., which this is the foundation of everything. And then we have the second chapter, which is the chapter of if you will listen to all that God tells us to do. So then over there it talks about all the other mitzvot that we should perform. And then we have the third chapter, which is the mitzvah of tzitzit, where the Torah talks about the laws regarding tzitzit, the strings that we wear. Jewish men primarily wear these strings of the tzitzit, which we're going to be discussing later on, what exactly they are, etc. But that's later on in the book. But we read the chapter in the Torah where it talks about the tzitzit, because over there it also talks about the remembrance of all the mitzvot. Now, although the mitzvah of tzitzis, to wear tzitzis, is only during the day, because it says in the Torah that you got to wear them by day. Now, but still we read the chapter of the mitzvah regarding the tzitzis also at night. And as well, also women, when they say Shema, they also read them, although they do not have a mitzvah of wearing tzitzit. But we read it, whenever we say the Shema, we read all 3 chapters, because over there, even in the 3rd chapter, it talks about the idea of remembering. We have a commandment of remembering when God took us out of Egypt. And therefore, this mitzvah of remembering that God took us out of Egypt is applicable to everyone at every point of time. So therefore, we always read it, including at night. So we begin by saying the verse of the Shema, which is the verse that we all know. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And then we add in another verse, which actually does not say in the Torah. There is a verse where we read and we say, "Blessed is the name of his kingdom forever and ever." Why do we read this verse? So it's a very fascinating concept which the Rambam discusses over here, and he says that there is a tradition, there is a Jewish tradition, that when Jacob, our forefather, was in Egypt and he was about to pass away, he gathered in all his children and he told them he was worried that maybe they did not all believe in God. Maybe there is someone who is, his belief in God is not complete. So he said, who is standing with me complete in their belief in the oneness of God? So the children of Jacob, or otherwise as known, his name was also called Israel in the Torah. God gave him a second name. So Jacob was called Jacob, but also Israel. So the children said, "Hear, O Israel," referring to their father, Jacob. "The Lord is our God, the Lord is one." In other words, pronouncing that God is one by saying that their belief in God was complete. And when that wise sage Jacob heard what they were saying, that they all pronounced their oneness, their belief in the oneness of God, so then he said, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever." And when we recite Shema today, because he was saying such a great praise about the Jewish people that they all believed in God, when we recite our belief in God, we also mention this praise that Jacob, our forefather, mentioned. Now, when a person recites the Shema, so in the day or at night, so there is an order of how we read it. In other words, it's not just we start reading the verses of the Shema, but rather there is actually a set prayer that we recite the Shema during that prayer. How does it work? So in the morning, there are two blessings that we recite before, and then we recite the Shema, and then there is another blessing that we recite after the reading of Shema. So in other words, we say one blessing, two blessings before, and one blessing in the first one where we speak about the fact that God created lightness and dark, day and night. And then we have another blessing in regards to God's love for the Jewish people. And then we recite the Shema in the middle. And after that, we have another blessing where we recite and we say how everything which we just said is all true. True and certain. Now, at night, we have two blessings before, then we recite the Shema, and then two blessings afterwards. So there is another blessing at night. There are actually different blessings in the morning and the night. But in the morning, there's only two before and one after. At night, there is two before and two afterwards. And over there, we speak about the fact that God created the evening. The second one is also another blessing where we speak about the everlasting love from God to the Jewish people. And then, after the recital of the Shema, there is one blessing where we recite and we say how all of this is true and faithful. And the second blessing after the Shema is the blessing that begins by saying, "Lay us down when we go to sleep." So this order of the blessings and the actual way they were set up are very specific. In other words, the first blessing begins with saying, "Baruch atah," blessed are you, God, and we start reciting the blessing. And the end of the first blessing also finishes, "Blessed are you, God, creator of the lights," the luminaries. But the second blessing doesn't begin with Baruch atah, blessed are you. Rather, it just begins straight off by saying how God's love is for the Jewish people. And it finishes off with Baruch atah, blessed are you. So certain blessings, the first one begins with Baruch, blessed are you in the beginning and in the end. But the other blessings only begin with the actual blessing without saying Baruch atah, without saying blessed are you, and it just begins talking about the context of the blessing. And then at the end it says Baruch atah, blessed are you, God, etc. So the blessings that begin with a Baruch, we have to begin with the Baruch. The blessings that finish with the Baruch, we have to finish with the Baruch, and we shouldn't interchange it to say Baruch in a place where we don't say the Baruch Atah, and vice versa as well. Now, and if anyone changes the order or changes the context and says the blessing of the morning at the night, or the blessing of the night in the morning, it's also not good. And even if a person made a mistake and started saying a blessing of the morning and the night, as long as they finished off saying the blessing correctly the way it's supposed to be said for that point of the day. So if we're at night, we finished off saying the blessing of the night, so then we're good. So everything goes after the ending. So even if we made a mistake in the beginning of the blessing, but if at the end we're doing the right thing, so then we're doing good. We don't have to do it again. So now, the question is, and this is what the Rambam is going to discuss now, is when is the time to recite the Shema? So in other words, we said day and night, morning and evening. When exactly is that? So the Rambam says like this. During the night, the law is that we recite the Shema from when it gets dark all the way till midnight. But if a person didn't do it before midnight, so then they can do it all the way till morning, till dawn. But if already the morning came, then it's already too late. But in essence, they should do it until midnight, because the rabbis said that we should do it before midnight, so that a person shouldn't be negligent and miss the time of the night, and it should become morning already, and then he'll miss it. So therefore, up until midnight. If we missed midnight, we can go till morning. Now, if a person was maybe very sick, or maybe drunk, or they were not in a state to be able to recite the Shema, so then they are able to actually do it even after the dawn has risen, but still they're able to recite the night Shema if it was not within their jurisdiction, so to speak. They weren't in charge at that point to be able to recite the Shema. But anyone else who is not sick or so on has to recite the Shema during the actual night. Now, what about the morning? So the mitzvah is that we should recite the Shema a little bit before the sun actually rises, so the physical time when the sun comes up onto the horizon. The Rambam says it's about a tenth of an hour before the sun rises, so about 6 minutes. So then we should say the blessings before the Shema. So they will take a few minutes to say those blessings, and then when the sun actually starts rising, we'll say the Shema with sunrise. But also you're able to do it after the sunrise. So up until 3 hours, that is still called morning for regular people. If a person recited it earlier than actual sunrise, it's already light outside, but the sun hasn't actually risen, so then it is okay. It is counted that they have recited the Shema. But in a case where when a person is not able to recite the Shema later for whatever reason, maybe they're going on a trip or so on and so forth, so then they can recite the Shema even earlier than sunrise, as long as it's already light outside. What about a person who missed reciting the Shema up until 3 hours of the day? So the day has begun, and now 3 hours have gone by, and 3 hours is not a long time since the sun rises, especially in the summer. The sun can rise at 6 a.m. By 9 o'clock, so the 3 hours are not regular hours on the clock, and this is another discussion for another opportunity, but there is an idea called the halachic times, in where we split up the entire day from sunrise all the way till sunset. Doesn't matter, doesn't go on the regular clock. It's not from, day is not from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., but rather depending on when sunrise is and when sunset is. So if, let's say in the summer, right now, if sunrise is, let's say in certain countries, it could be at 5 a.m. and sunset could be at 7 p.m. So the day is not 12 hours, but rather it's like 15 hours. So or 14 hours, however many hours it is, we're going to split up that amount into 12 pieces. So every hour will really be not 60 minutes, but maybe 70 minutes, and so on. So therefore, that's how we're going to count these hours. But it's an interesting idea. It's called the halachic times, halachic hour. And that's how we count those 3 hours based off that. So if a person missed that amount of time, when that window of reciting the Shema, they are able to recite it later on in the day, but the mitzvah of reciting Shema has already passed. But they're still able to pray, to say the blessings before, the blessings afterwards. They can recite the Shema, but again, it's just as if they are reading the verses in the Torah, which at that point they're not actually doing the mitzvah, but although they can still do it. So that is the first chapter of the Book of Love, where we have started learning all the laws regarding what we do on a day-to-day basis. So here we are learning all about the laws of reciting Shema. So we will see you tomorrow for the continuation of the laws in regards to reciting the Shema. We will see you all. Have a very good one.